very, very true.
We're in the Cold War here.
I know, it's March and it feels like January.
Well, yeah, I mean, for you, that's pretty normal.
I guess so.
Yeah. Me, sometimes it's warm right now, and sometimes we get snow this time of the year. I mean, I just know
it's unpredictable.
Yeah, I'm just done with it, man. I need warm.
It's very interesting you mentioned the beach. It's very interesting that you mentioned, well, you haven't mentioned yet, but you're going on a road trip.
Yeah.
Which is why this episode is out a little bit earlier this week. This is the newest episode of the Cinema Discovery Project.
Hey, we are the Cinema Discovery Project. You're right.
We are. You're Stephen Billings. I'm Andrew Cabral.
Wow.
And we are doing another spotlight, and it is a road movie. A little bit unconventional road movie for somewhat of it, but we'll get into all that. And we're doing a spotlight on the movie called Two for the Road.
And one for the show?
And one for the show, I guess. And it stars the late Albert Finney as well as Audrey Hepburn. It is directed by the late Stanley Donen, who just passed away February 7th, which is barely a month ago.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that this movie is a road movie. You're going on a road trip, and coincidentally, you want to go to the beach, and there is a sequence in this movie where they're at the beach.
At the beach, man. A little bit of everything, man. I mean, I loved, when we were talking about it a little beforehand, you had a spot-on comparison. If you're a fan of the Before trilogy by Richard Linklater, this very much kind of is kind of a very similar kind of tale, but kind of more compact into one film.
It did come out, 3 to 4 decades earlier.
So it's ahead of its time in a way,
Yes.
and it's, and I think even for its time, it was, because this did get nominated for Best Writing. It was his only Oscar nomination. So
it's a good screenplay.
Yeah, it's a good, tight screenplay, and it's a lot of layers, has a lot of depth to it in a movie that's under 2 hours.
Yes, surprisingly under 2 hours, and it moves well for the most part. But we're going to get into that. It is a movie that came out in 1967. Of course, it's a film that is 52 years old, not quite that 50th anniversary mark that a lot of people will be celebrating this year in the world of movies. But we wanted to kind of shine a light on it because it's a movie that, stars two dearly departed well-known people in the movie world, in Stanley Donen and Albert Finney, and Audrey Hepburn's an all-time icon, so that just happened to be an extra layer to it as well. And it's a movie that I have seen for a second time. This will be my second time watching it. I watched it last year on the now unfortunately defunct Filmstruck streaming service, where they had a bunch of Audrey Hepburn films and classic films, from back then. So I definitely benefited from it while it was still around. But once again, a running, theme through line throughout the Cinema Discovery Project is mentioning Filmstruck and how we miss it.
How we miss it, and how we're so excited for the Criterion Channel to be making its appearance here soon, here in about a month. So we'll be able to use that as a resource. Yeah, be great.
Yeah, this film is also has the music by Henry Mancini, who is a really well-known musical composer. And he, coincidentally, when I was doing research for this movie, he said that this was actually one of the most difficult film compositions that he had to do in his career, which is interesting to me because it's a movie that its themes are very much laid out there for us.
Yeah.
Its motifs and all of those things are not, they're not hidden. They're there. They are, right out there. So if you want to hit certain motifs and things like that, you can definitely do it. Henry Mancini also composed Breakfast at Tiffany's, that also starred Audrey Hepburn as well, probably her most iconic role. And he's pretty well known. He has over 200 credits on IMDb for music composition. That is a significant amount of music composition, credits. And we mentioned that when we did our music in film episode where these composers, work for decades on stuff, and a lot of things that you're not even aware that they've worked on, because unfortunately people really don't pay that much attention to the music in the movies most of the time. At least not like a more casual.
In a way, that's almost what they want. You want to take in a movie as a whole, and you want it to just feel all part of one thing. But for us, film nerds, we love to pick that stuff apart. So
we do. We love to look at all of the parts.
Yeah.
And this is a film that, like I said, is directed by Stanley Donen, who, if you're not familiar with Stanley Donen, you probably should be, because he did Singin' in the Rain, which is probably one of the most beloved and, well-known movie musicals of all time. It's certainly one of my favorite. Me actually being my favorite.
I think it's,
that and West Side Story.
Yeah, I think Singin' in the Rain's probably my favorite. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but he also did other films as well. He did, typically he did a couple of films with Audrey Hepburn as well. He did Funny Face, which is a movie with her, and he also did Charade, which is a movie with her and Cary Grant. It was towards the later part of Cary Grant's career. It was actually one of his last films that he did, but it's pretty awesome to see those two icons on screen together.
Yeah.
Cary Grant being one of my favorites of all time. But this film is very interesting because Steven and I were discussing how it has a non-linear plot. This is a movie which its plot structure is done kind of via flashback for a good portion of it, until I would say the last third of the movie, where we kind of progress forward from where we start at the beginning.
Yeah.
But most of it's done in flashback, and it's done in a series of road trips through the French countryside, basically. And we start off at the very beginning. I guess we'll just start off with we'll just get into this plot while we're here. And for anyone who hasn't seen these Spotlight episodes before or listened to them, we do delve into spoiler territory, so we get all up in there and spoil the heck out of the movie. But we encourage people that if you do want to listen to this episode, to watch the movie first. If you don't care about spoilers, then just listen and then still watch the movie, because usually the movies we highlight are still pretty great, whether you know what they're about or not.
And you can if you want to check this out, it's on Amazon right now to rent. It was only $3.99, so not too bad for a great classic film.
Yes.
So
there is a Blu-ray release available through Twilight Time, which is rather expensive because they kind of are.
They're always expensive.
A very niche Blu-ray distribution company. Coincidentally, they have a lot of the 20th Century Fox, backlog catalog of movies. And Steven and I have always kind of wondered, with the now Disney Fox merger, what's going to happen with that back catalog. And I'm just going to guess Fox really wasn't doing much with it anyway, so I guess it's just going to stay.
Yeah, it's just going to
stay where it is.
Either they're going to embrace it, which I doubt, or lock it away in their vault, maybe throw it on streaming, maybe. Who knows? Who knows what they're going to do?
Or just continue to sell it out to these, niche labels to put out.
That's what I would hope. That's what I would hope.
Whether it be Kino, Criterion, Olive, or Twilight Time. Because that seems to be what they do anyways. That's what a lot of the big studios do. But it is available there. I believe there's a DVD as well. And who knows if it shows up on a streaming service somewhere. It could possibly be, because there are other streaming services out there that we don't subscribe to, so we're not aware of what they have to offer. But getting into the film, it starts off with our couple, which is Albert Finney and Audrey Hepburn. And their characters' names are Mark and Joanna, and last name Wallace, I believe. Yeah. But we get a portion of the film where they're not married, so I'm not even sure what her maiden name is.
I would assume that it's Mark Wallace is I would assume that,
that is his name, and we see them, I believe, driving in a Mercedes, like a white Mercedes, expensive car, and where they are at in their relationship is kind of towards the bad side, the end side, the downward side of their marriage. This film does encompass about 12 years of their lives, I believe over a 10-year marriage or so. And it's very interesting how we see the ups and downs, and I think it's very interesting that we start with the down as opposed to starting with the up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nothing like starting a movie on a very sour note. And what we see is they have a very cold relationship. It's a relationship that they don't seem to interact with one another in a very loving manner. They're kind of just sitting stern, very stoic in their car and driving, to their destination.
All the passion that you'll see at the beginning of their relationship is completely dissipated to them kind of feeling like they've resented each other,
Right.
and blame each other for their unhappiness.
That is true. And they are going to, I believe, a place in south of France where Mark is this really successful architect, and they're going to celebrate one of his achievements with his kind of main client, Maurice, who comes up a lot during this movie.
Yeah.
He's kind of a very interesting antagonistic part of their relationship, but he's like not purposely antagonistic. He's just there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in their relationship, he plays a kind of a big antagonistic role. So they are on their way there. We see them driving, and we see them getting on a ship. On a plane initially.
Yeah.
And they get on a plane, and he can't find his passport. And he's like, he tells the
stewardess,
the flight attendant, stewardess at the time, flight attendant now, that, we got to go back. I don't have my passport. And I'm thinking to myself, he has to have his passport because he couldn't have gotten on the plane.
Well, it was a different time, but I mean,
right.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, if I didn't have my passport, I'd start panicking too.
Oh,
and be
yeah.
like, oh my goodness, I lost.
We're gonna have to turn.
He
was like, we're gonna have to turn around. I'm like,
turn around.
What?
That's gonna create some air traffic
it's
problems.
that easy. It's that easy. Let's turn the plane around. Like, dude, Albert Finney, what the hell are you thinking?
I know, but
by the way, before we get too far into this, Albert Finney was a good-looking man for his time.
Oh yeah.
Let's not forget how hunky Albert Finney was.
He is very hunky in this movie, especially when you get into the flashbacks of where he's this young, not macho man, but he's, traveling the countryside basically by backpack.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a ladies' man.
I was gonna say, I mean, to be honest, I have not seen a lot of Albert Finney movies,
right.
But this is one of the earliest ones I've seen, and I'm like, dude, this dude must have been a lady. Probably was a real ladies' man in real life.
Well, it is interesting you mentioned that because he and Audrey Hepburn had an affair, I believe, while making this movie, or at the same time, around the same time. But that's something kind of outside the movie, and it's very interesting. At the time, Audrey Hepburn's marriage to Mel Ferrer wasn't going so well, and they would actually divorce in 1968. So they had a tumultuous
very
marriage.
Convenient. They were the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie of their time. Okay.
I don't know about that.
Okay, maybe
I don't
not.
know, but we all know about celebrity marriages, how they tend to come and go.
They seem to be so fickle.
And what's interesting is that that's not just a modern thing or a 90s thing. That
been happening.
That goes back decades. Yeah. Gossip columns and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And infidelities within marriages have been on forever, but I mean, within celebrity couples have gone on forever.
Yeah, we talked about it with when we talked about Gilda. We talked about Rita Hayworth and all that stuff going on with that.
Well, yeah, famously Orson Welles and their marriage had very tumultuous times, and I believe he cheated on her with Judy Garland or things like that. Anywho, back on track, back on the road.
Back on the road. Yes.
Back on the road. Well, in the air, and he doesn't have his passport, and it turns out that Audrey Joanna has his passport. So of course he feels like a bit of a fool. But that's an interesting connection because that same situation comes up several times in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's a kind of a very interesting how they plant that there at that specific point. And then the way that they are introduced to us in their younger form when they first meet is when they is the same situation.
Yeah. They're on their way, I guess, hitchhiking.
And what happens is, initially, before we get to that,
sure.
They get off the plane and they're Yeah, and they're driving through the countryside, and then she's reminiscing about how they first met, and she says certain things like, you haven't loved me since we've met, and then it flashes back to the point in which they met, which was on a ferry in I think the mid 1950s or whatever, and she is in this all girl musical band, I believe, and they're traveling, they're touring or something, or they're trying to get to some place to perform or whatnot, and he's just kind of hitchhiking and traveling, backpacking through the countryside, and they're on this ferry, and I believe it may be the ferry from England to France. They traveling the English Channel. I'm not quite sure, but that would be my guess. And he can't find his passport once again, and they're about to land, and he's looking through his stuff, and he's telling people, has anybody seen a passport around? Everybody seen a passport around? And then the guy's like, oh, you can't find your passport. It's like, yeah, somebody must have stolen it, because, they go for I think he said 100 pounds or 200 pounds on the black market or something like that. And that's a very interesting thing, of people stealing other people's passports and making forgeries and whatnot. Probably still practiced today for all I know. And of course, she reaches down in his bag, and he's like, oh, look, somebody's stealing my stuff right now. And she pulls out his passport, and that's how they meet. It's very, very...
Yeah, very, very much parallel. They use this juxtaposition throughout the whole movie, and it kind of highlights, something that was once a cute thing, something that, it kind of almost symbolizes the beginnings of their connection, and how when they bring it up later in their relationship, how that one thing that used to be cute is not so cute anymore, I guess, at least from Mark's point of view. It really shows where it shows maybe maybe Mark was not as invested as she was, maybe.
Well, initially, he's very laissez-faire about
yeah
marriage and commitment and relationship and all that kind of stuff, and we see it... pretty much, what is interesting right from the beginning is that he doesn't even pursue her romantically.
Yeah.
She kind of pursues him in a way. The film has dramatic moments, romantic, kind of over-romanticized moments, and it has comedic moments as well. And one of the interesting comedic moments is when Joanna and her group of friends are in this tour bus, this VW type of bus, and they're driving... this van, bus, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're driving, and they drive off the road, and he is coincidentally also traveling on the same road in the back of a tractor. It's a very interesting juxtaposition, and he helps them get the van out of the thing, and then and then he's driving it. And what happens is the girls, for some reason, contract chicken pox.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's such a weird thing to happen at that specific moment. And there's even chickens in the road to show that it's chicken pox without telling you. The film has some great scene transitions, and right from the beginning, we see the chicken. And then the next scene is a doctor saying, yeah, it's chicken pox.
Sometimes
really
if you're not paying attention in this movie, you'll get confused because of the transitions being so they're kind of seamless sometimes.
Yeah, I got confused sometimes where we are, because there's about 4 stories happening at the same time, and they're cutting back and forth with one another. And not only are we getting this kind of first... meeting romance type situation, we're getting we jump into another scene where they're taking their trip in their first car together, and it's an MG, and they keep mentioning it's an MG. The first shot we see is the front of the grill where it says MG on it, and they get off, and but isn't this the scene where she has to they get off, I believe, it looks like a boat, and he's trying to start it to get it going, and it's not moving. It looks like one of those cars that has a manual transmission where we have gears and clutches and things like that. Those things can be difficult to get going, and for some reason, it's not, he can't get it going, so he has her get out and push.
Yeah, I know, right?
And I'm like, and he's like, somebody needs to give us a push, and he doesn't say her, and she's like, she's looking around at the sailors and the dock workers that are there, these big guys, and then she's like, and then she does it herself. And he gets it going, and then he circles back and picks her up, and she's like, "Remember me, Joanna, your wife?" And they're going down the countryside, and it's kind of like a couple of years into their marriage.
Yeah.
So the film is not linear when it comes to even delving into, the years in their marriage, because we have that storyline happening, them in their first car, they're traveling down this countryside, going on this road trip, and then it transitions to another road trip they're having with another married couple from a few years earlier.
Annoying couple ever.
With the most annoying couple and the most annoying child you'll ever see in a movie.
This
perhaps.
is maybe my worst nightmare. Yeah.
And the reason why they know this couple is that the wife in this is an ex-girlfriend of Mark, and I believe she's American because he spent 2 years at the University of Chicago. He mentions that at some point. There's a great montage in their first meeting sequence where they're just eating and hitchhiking. And they're just eating and hitchhiking. And then he's just like going off saying all kinds of stuff. They're eating baguette, they're eating fruit, they're eating cheese and all kind of stuff. And then I believe that's where he mentions this girlfriend. And then we transition into this trip.
I don't know whose idea this trip was.
No, and apparently it was like a multiple weeks long trip with this couple. And apparently we learned that this is about 2 years or so into their marriage, because they keep referring to them as newlyweds, but I believe they mentioned that they're like 2 years into their marriage or so much. But it's still in that early marriage phase. Yeah. And if you have keen eyes like I do, the husband, whose character's name is Howie, is played by William Daniels, who is Mr. Feeney in Boy Meets World.
Ah, yes.
From the 90s. If you're a 90s kid, you know who that is.
Mr. Feeney.
And coincidentally, at the time, before he was Mr. Feeney, he was a movie actor and a TV actor. And coincidentally, in the same year as Two for the Road came out, he was also in The Graduate.
Nice.
Where Dustin Hoffman is. He was like a friend of the father's who was into the plastics industry or whatever, and he was trying to get the kid to hey, work in the plastics industry like me or something like that. It's been a while since I've seen The Graduate.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's this one sequence in The Graduate where Dustin Hoffman's in the water, and then he comes up and it's a POV shot through his goggles, and it's William Daniels, Mr. Feeney, standing right there. Or does he play his father? Oh man, it's been so long since I've seen The Graduate.
It might be. I think it might actually have been his father, maybe.
I think it is the father. Yeah, it is. See, it's been so long since I've seen it.
It's okay. We're not talking about The Graduate.
I know, we're talking about The Graduate. But anywho, Mr. Feeney is here, and man, is he one
dude? He
annoying
is super
guy.
super anal. Everything's
super anal.
It's like he's like trying to be super smart about everything, like
organized,
organized, anal, just down to the T. Like they're having a dinner, which the child wanted to eat, and then of course when they get there, now she doesn't want to eat. But they're trying to eat, and he's like trying to split up the expenses of the first part of the trip down to the math, like down to the cent. And he's like, I think I got the right equation here. You want to check it?
Yeah, he's splitting it like, what's he splitting, like 5.5 ways or 4.5 ways?
Stupid.
Or some nonsense thing. And then he's
like including the child or something.
Yeah, the child just counts as half expenses. And it's like, whatever, guy. And so he shows it to Albert Finney's Mark's character, who just barely looks at it. He's like, yeah, I trust you, whatever. Yeah. And he's also organized to the point where all the adults have to take a turn driving, and each of them has a specific amount of miles they're supposed to go until they switch off, and all this kind of stuff. And man, but this child is so annoying because they're this couple who they are kind of laissez-faire when it comes to the
disciplining of the child.
The way they discipline their child, they basically don't at all. They have their child make all their own decisions.
To the point where they have a scene where they let this child pull the keys out of the car while Audrey Hepburn's driving, and then she throws the keys out of the window, and they have to spend hours looking for the keys, which makes no sense that the keys were literally like right in front of the car.
She didn't throw it that far because you know, she's a little girl. She can't throw that far.
When she finally points out where the keys are, I'm like, how in the fuck did they not find them keys?
Yeah, how did they not find that like right away?
Like right away.
It's the closest spot to the car.
Yeah. Like you check there first. You don't check the furthest away to the car first.
And for some reason, the child does not like Joanna at all, and. And
there's a scene where the
Mr.
mom,
Finney,
the mom is like,
Finney,
you're not connecting with her.
Maybe you should try to connect with her.
You should try hard. You should try more to. I'm like, dude, it ain't her fucking daughter. Who gives a shit?
No, but it's like, but Howie, Mr. Feeney's like, oh, you resent the child because the child is not the child, is the child that you don't have. And I'm like, whoa, that's
this
a little
dude
judgmental.
Needs to be punched in the face.
Clearly. And what is interesting is that storyline, that story ends with basically, Albert Finney's character's like, yeah, we've had enough. This is effing nonsense. So we got to get out.
Yeah,
of here.
He can't even take it anymore.
So he gets out of the car. They starts pulling the luggage off the top of the car, and then Howie's like, you're too stern with her. You keep telling her what to do. You're disciplinarian and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, God, just go away. And what is interesting is, he's kind of right for the most part. The Albert Finney character does become really stern, as the relationship goes on and whatnot. But still, in that moment, the guy's just super judgmental and has absolutely no social awareness of what not to say. And what is interesting is this movie came out in 1967, and you still run into those people today.
Yeah,
where they have no sense of social awareness about how to act in public or how to talk to people that they don't really know that well, or maybe even people that they do know. They still don't know how to talk to.
Yeah.
And it's just really, really fascinating. But for the first hour or so of the movie, we spent a lot of time with them meeting up in their first encounter. And we're seeing really how that love got molded from the beginning.
Yeah.
It got really molded right from the start. It's kind of, a love at first meeting situation.
Yeah,
traveling together.
They had one of their earliest moments. They did have another moment of that, misplacing the passport where, they're leaving together on the road, hiking, and he's about to take a car back to where he thinks he left his passport.
Just, holds it up and waves at him,
and he jumps back out of the car, and then he,
What is interesting is leading up to that scenario, I thought was really interesting because I had mentioned that he wasn't really, romantically pursuing her. It was actually like her friend who he was romantically pursuing.
Yeah. And then she got chicken pox.
Yeah, at the last possible moment. Yeah. What is very interesting is I don't even know how that whole situation was going, but basically, the other members of the band or whatever, or the musical group, were going to stay behind, and they were going to leave the van with them and then just hitchhike the rest of the way there. And basically, Mark and I forgot who the other woman was, and they basically came up with this deal. It's like, whoever, is awake in the morning, or whoever comes down in the morning and doesn't have the chicken pox will do that, essentially.
Yeah.
So they're already set to go, and then out pops, Audrey Hepburn. Joanna just says, "Oh yeah, I'm ready to go too," and they're like, "Oh okay." And then
who's this woman?
Yeah, and then of course the friend gets the chicken pox, and so the scene cuts to them walking down the road together. And what is very interesting is at one point she gets in a car and drives away from him, and he ends up finding her ways down the road, and she gets out, and it's at that point where she's pretty much already fallen for him. And she's standing in front of that traffic light.
Yeah, that was funny.
With the arms waving.
Funny.
Yeah. With the arms waving, and she was like, "What?" And he was like, "Oh, so what did you say to your friend?" And I forgot what the name of the car was, R. Ferrero or something like that, or R. Romero or whatever the name of the car was. There's actually a lot of cool looking cars in this movie, and she just says, I got to get out because I'm in love with that guy, and they embrace and whatnot, and they go to that town, and they go to that restaurant / inn place where they ask for a room. And as they're going up to this room, they look down at this old couple. And this old couple is just sitting there at this table looking off into the distance, not interacting at all, not talking to one another, nothing at all. And they basically, and they look and they say, how awful that is, to be in that situation.
Yeah, they basically say it's like how can how can you get to a place where two people can just sit down and not say anything to each other? And they're like, what can do that is like marriage can do that.
Marriage can do that.
Yeah.
And it's very foreshadowing.
Yeah,
because that's kind of what literally happens to them. It's very, very foreshadowing. The next scene cuts to them like they're lying in bed, and another comedic moment goes. It's like,
oh yeah,
he
this
goes,
is great.
I never thought I would do this. Like, this is not something I do normally. And he's like, I never planned on staying in a hotel room. That's why I brought my tent.
Yeah.
And she thinks it's like, sleeping essentially with a strange woman or whatever, or or falling in love with a woman with someone you just met.
Yeah.
But no, it's kind of like a double joke inside there. I thought that was really funny.
Now, didn't this get paralleled a little bit with a scene that was later where they stay at a like after their car breaks down?
Yes.
Gets set on gets set on fire.
Back to that car sequence. Yeah, these two do kind of bounce back and forth.
Yeah.
And back to that, they're driving
when they're doing that drive car together in that car for the first time.
Yeah, the MG. Yeah. And basically,
it's making weird noises.
A donk noise, like a donk.
Yeah.
And right away it's making that noise, and they stop initially because there's something wrong, and he fixes it, and he gets oil in like his eye because he's underneath the car.
Yeah.
And she's just sitting on top of it cracking jokes, and it's really, really funny. And she remarks, it's like, it's a lot easier to do things when you're not in the dark, which is an interesting line for me. It has nothing to do, it's probably not intentional, is because in 1967 is the same year that the movie that she was in, Wait Until Dark.
Yeah.
Where she's blind and she can't see. And it's really interesting
Inside joke.
And it's kind of like, I don't even know if it was intentional.
Probably
I
not.
Doubt you.
Probably
They were making the movies at the same time. It's very interesting how she was nominated for an Oscar for that movie and not for this movie. I heard that it was either between one of these two that she could be nominated for.
That's rough, yeah.
Because I think she's great in both.
She's really
movies.
great in both, yeah. I'd say this is the better movie, though.
Yeah,
I'd say it's the better all-around movie, yeah.
Yeah, this movie has a lot more to say, and I think it has a lot more staying power in terms of longevity.
Yeah.
Because it is about something that I think is a universal subject, marriage.
You see a lot of other, as we said, the Before trilogy, a lot of other films have tackled this subject in a similar way. Yeah.
But basically, their car is got some mechanical problems.
It's got some issues.
It's got some issues.
They start to get flagged down by other cars that there's a problem.
Yeah, they're trying to drive uphill, and they're struggling to get uphill. Can't quite get this, so they decide to reverse it. And then one of the exhaust pipes falls off.
Rough.
So he's got to put it back on. And you could see, and there's a shot like below the car where the thing is basically tied on.
Yeah.
It's basically tied into place. This thing needs to be replaced.
This is beyond duct tape problems.
Yeah, but what we learn is that they're at a point in their marriage and their lives that they're not financially well off.
Yeah.
Unlike we see in their, quote unquote present time, where he's now a well-known architect and he's got money and all kinds of stuff. Because it's interesting in their first meetup storyline, he's actually photographing architectural structures with a camera, and that's kind of what he's doing because he's an architect. But they're at the point where he's not well known now, he doesn't have the money, so they can't afford to fix the car. So the car, it starts to smoke and starts to light on fire, and he goes to open up the hood, and the engine's on fire, like real fire. And he's like, quick, go get some water. And I'm like, oh boy, this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
She grabs water, she dumps it on there, and it rages even more.
Likes
because
water.
It's a grease fire. You don't pour water on a grease fire, you're just going to make it worse.
Yeah.
And that, with the engine, there's engine grease and oil and all that kind of stuff.
Finally, the fire department shows up, and
they show up with
they're like throwing
this
bubbles.
Contraption. I've never seen a contraption like this before, where it's just this giant foam machine with a giant hose and all kind of hoses and stuff.
It looked like fun, actually. It looked like fun.
It looked like, like,
it was a foam party.
Yeah, what kind of bothered me is like they put way too much foam on it. Like the fire was already out and they just kept going. Like it
was already a party by then. Yeah.
But like, and what is interesting is like all of their luggage had foam all over it and all that stuff. And I'm like, the first stuff I would have grabbed would have been the luggage to get it as far away from the fire as possible. Yeah. So it doesn't catch on fire.
They just stood there.
And they just stood there and kind of watched. I guess they were kind of in shock. I mean,
probably.
You don't expect your car to light on fire.
It was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. Yeah, it just that thing just went up in flames. It was pretty rough.
It is pretty rough. So they have to stay in this hotel. Fancier hotel, and it's got a restaurant.
And they already don't have a lot of money, as we said.
And they can't afford to eat in the hotel restaurant. And apparently it's one of those hotels where you cannot go and get food from other places and bring it in. I guess it's it's one of those situations.
Fuck that.
So the scene transitions into him in the bathtub, and she's just like spraying him with water and all that kind of stuff. But what we learned while they were driving is that she's actually pregnant, which is very interesting because in the other storyline, the one with the annoying other family and kids, they basically turn to each other and say, we agreed that before we got married, we wouldn't have children. And she's like, he's like, do you still want children? And she's like, I still want children. I just don't want that child.
Yeah.
I mean?
Like he kind of becomes contentious. He's like, we said we weren't going to have kids. And it's like, yeah, that was before we were married. We said we weren't going to have kids. We're married now, and now I want kids.
Yeah, but it's like not that child.
Yeah,
that
child and of course not that child, that fucking demon child.
So there's stuff like that in this movie where that helps us place time frames and timelines.
Very much, it shows different points of view of decisions at the time feel right. Like when she said maybe at the beginning of their relationship that they didn't necessarily need to have children, but now that they're together and they're committed to each other, and now she wants more. It shows you that as you grow as people and as your relationship grows, you start to want other things. And sometimes and with Mark's character, he seems to not be able to he can't deal with that. He likes his routine. He's a little bit selfish, just put it that way. He likes things for himself. Obviously, right. When he starts cheating on her.
That one sequence. Yeah. That's another storyline that is very, very,
very fleeting. But it happens.
Yeah, it happens later on in the film, like past the hour mark, like
when he starts to get successful. When he starts to get successful,
and he's driving around like a red convertible, like a boss. You know what I mean? I guess.
Yeah, like a boss. Yeah. And there's this girl. It's very much like it made me think of National Lampoon's girl, really hot. Comes up on you on the road. She's like got the blonde hair.
Yeah.
She's like looking at you, and you're like, oh yeah. And then they kind of go do this twisty thing on the road, back and forth.
It's a very interesting sequence that has no dialogue in it.
Yeah, but
it has a narration.
You know what's going on here. Yeah.
It has a narration, and the narration is the complete opposite of what's going on. He's traveling the countryside, I believe, on a business trip, and he's, I believe, either writing a letter to her or calling her and leaving a message or something like that.
It's kind of showing that what he's lying about.
Yeah, and he's basically saying, I can't stay at the same hotels that we were staying in because you're not there. I feel kind of weird doing that. And then meanwhile, on the screen, it's literally the exact opposite where he's, literally cheating on her in a fleeting moment. And what is interesting is it's all told visually.
Yeah.
They're driving together, kind of, playing car tag, if you will.
Yeah.
And then they meet up, and you see that their two cars are parked outside this hotel. You see a shot of them in the room together, and then you see a shot of them driving away from each other. And there's literally a fork in the road, them going their separate ways. Yeah. But it shows you that this marriage is having problems.
Yeah.
And we already know that from the beginning sequence of, them, on this trip, and they basically hate each other. And there's a trip where there's a moment in that timeline where she literally gets out of the car and just says like, I'm just gonna go away,
walk the rest of the way,
and we're seeing that their problems were probably years in the making, because there's a sequence after in the second half of the movie I think is when things get kind of confusing and kind of more difficult to keep up with for me personally. And that's from watching it a second time, because we kind of, the first part of the movie, the first half of the movie is basically all the things that we've been saying. It's, bouncing back and forth between the beginning, the first meetup storyline, the road trip with the annoying family, and and a little bit of the beginning part where they're hate each other.
Yeah.
But the second part is when things kind of keep switching back and forth very rapidly, and when things can get a little confusing, and we also get to see like how their marriage and how their relationship really took a turn for the worst. Like there is a sequence or a timeline story where they've already had the baby. The baby's the child's a few years old. I believe they have a young daughter named Carolyn, and they're going on a road trip with the child. And it is problematic because he's trying to work, but she wants him to watch the child, and she's just dead concentrated on doing the work or working on these blueprints that he's working on. And then there's this whole thing where they're at this hotel, and they ordered breakfast, and the breakfast hasn't come, so he has to go down and check up on it. He's all in a mess, in a rage because of over like a hard-boiled egg, which keeps actually popping up like several times in the movie. Like they had a hard-boiled egg on their road trip with the MG. I believe they had a hard-boiled egg in some other sequences as
probably
well.
In that when they went and eat the food with the other family. I think
and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of interesting how that just keeps popping up. I don't know why. Maybe it's a metaphor for something, egg meaning something, I'm not sure. But basically they get kicked out of that hotel, or he threatens to leave and they get kicked out essentially. So they have to go to another hotel, and it's creating all of this friction that we know is already there, and it's just making it worse. And it's really interesting how this deterioration continues. And that's when we get to kind of we pick up with the modern storyline from the beginning, where they're on this trip to celebrate this architectural achievement or whatever, and we get to the house, the Maurice's house. And Maurice, we actually learn the origin of the relationship with Maurice is actually in the storyline where their car lights on fire, because they sneak food into the hotel, and all the, and they interesting, the next morning that night there's apparently a mosquito problem. And they have to close the window, and there's mosquitoes are still in there, and so they decide to pop the tent and sleep in the tent. And then the maid comes in the next morning, or servant or whatever, and bringing breakfast, and said, "Oh, you didn't use the mosquito net?
You didn't use that mosquito
net? It's literally
net?
hanging right there." And basically they're like, "Oh, okay." But then they go down to check out because they got to get out of it. They can't afford to stay in that place any longer. So they go to pay the bill, and apparently in the price, because it's high season, the peak season, if you will, it was included dinner and breakfast. So they literally could have eaten the dinner and the breakfast because they were already going to pay for it anyways. And they didn't. So there goes that. And the fire marshal needs to see them about, the paying for the car that was on fire. And there's a great sequence there where Albert Finney's character just handing him bills, basically.
He's just getting more and more pissed off that he has to give
because the
them
guy's
money.
like, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. He's speaking in French, and you need this, you need that, and then he needs like an extra to dispose of this hunk of charred car, and they're like, no, we'll take it.
There was also a part of that was back when we were talking about the comparison scene with this scene, where that was the earlier scene. There was that funny moment too. I don't know that we talked about where the train. She has the dream about the train.
Oh,
and then the train actually comes by the place they're staying. Really, and it like shakes the whole room. Yeah. That was a really fun scene.
That was really fun, but I think that happens later on.
Is that come back later?
I think it does.
Yeah. It's all like a lot of metaphorical stuff.
Metaphors, foreshadowing, and stuff like that. But so they take this car, and they're just pushing it down the road, and this car comes up behind him, and just beeping at him for some reason, maybe to
to get out the hell out of the way, yeah, I guess.
So they both turn around and let go of the car, and they're going downhill.
Yeah.
So the car just keeps going. Of
course,
right? this charred car just keeps going.
Think about the comparison to the later scene where he's still in the car and makes her get out and push. They were both pushing at that moment.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. The differences and comparisons and the contrasting. There's a lot of comparisons and contrasting within this movie because of all the storylines. And it's really something you need to watch for yourself, because just us describing it really doesn't
it's confusing.
do it.
It's got to be confusing.
It's confusing as hell.
Yeah.
We're bouncing around because the movie literally bounces around this much.
Yeah. It can be a challenging movie, and that shouldn't deter you away from watching it. It
really, really shouldn't.
You should take it as a challenge. So.
But anywho, so this car is going downhill, and this gets away from it. It gets in this guy's farmland, and this dude's on his tractor.
Messes up this whole under
this hay.
It was kind of a thing he puts his farm equipment under, I think.
Yeah. It looked like it was just filled with hay, but
it was just a really shitty one. And it got
knocked,
it really was. And the car really takes it out, and so
the car really knocks over like one beam, but apparently that one beam was the most important beam in the whole thing.
Yeah, and so then the guys the car that was honking at them came in and took some responsibility. Yeah, and started paying the farmer.
Yeah, and the farmer's just going off, and he's handing him these bills.
He keeps handing him more money. Kind of the same thing Albert Finney was doing in the previous scene.
And the farmer's his voice just he starts slowing down as he's just collecting
that's
money.
You know what? Maybe another.
It's I gotta pay for this, gotta pay for that. He's just talking. He just he starts out yelling in French, and then he gets quieter and quieter.
Yeah.
And we learn that this guy who's paying him off is Maurice, somebody whose name we've heard before, and this is where they first meet, and this is where Maurice finds out that Mark is an architect, and I'm assuming this is where he hires him, and the rest is a successful financial story. So, and then now we get back to what I was trying to get at before, is they do get to the Maurice's house, and I think this is the sequence where they go by the pool and all that kind of stuff, and they have a very contentious relationship.
They're playing ping pong.
They're playing ping pong, and Audrey Hepburn and Joanna is, she gets the ping pong ball and she pretends to swallow it or whatever. Yeah. And she's just she's frustrated that
she wants attention.
She wants attention. She feels like she's not getting any attention from her husband. And, I believe at one point she remarks that, this may be later on in the movie actually, where she remarked, your 10-minute conversations go on for 6 hours or whatnot. Yeah. And we see that this is already at a point where they're really, really contentious relationship. And
it shows
he throws her in the pool.
Yeah, and then she pulls him in the pool.
Yeah, she pulls him in the pool. It's a playful situation, but it's still antagonistic.
You can tell that there's a strain there.
Yeah.
It tells you, her that particular scenario tells you, and it's something that kind of comes up a lot. It tells you that he's kind of, what am I looking for? He's very
controlling,
or he's definitely not empathetic to her feelings. He's not. He has a hard time seeing where she's coming from when it comes to her digs at him. It's like it goes over his head when she's trying to get his attention, and he won't. It's like he just doesn't care. His empathy is just not there.
Yes, and they also end up taking a trip to the beach, and this trip, she keeps jumping back and forth with their first trip to the beach when they first met, because their whole
that's super romantic.
Yeah, the first one's super romantic, and the second one is not. And not only do they cut back and forth between the first time and that time, but they also cut to the time they went to the beach on the road trip with their child. Yeah, and that's also problematic as well. So you're seeing the differences in time.
Kids ruin everything. Yeah,
I guess that's. I guess or whatever.
That's what that part of it's like. Yeah, kids ruin everything.
And you're seeing the difference. Yeah, you see the differences. And the first time it's romantic.
Yeah.
they get there and they start celebrating because like, oh, we made it all the way on this trip. We hitchhiked this whole way. We're finally at the shore in the south of France, I assume, and they lie on that's where the train part comes in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because they're staying kind of like this not crappy hotel, but this lesser hotel, but it doesn't matter because
they're together.
And they're together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They go to the beach and they lie there in the sand, but they lie there for too long that they get sunburned.
Yeah, that was
and
funny.
They're like, what do we do? Just stand here forever?
Yeah, and they just they try to kiss each other, and it's like very.
Yeah, and you know what happens is she dives into the bed, and then it transitions to her diving into the pool at Maurice's house.
Yeah.
And that's where we get the whole situation with the ping pong balls. With the ping pong ball and all that stuff we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, cool transitions like that. I mean, we just see them, but we just see this bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, it's like that. It's an interesting parallel, that where they're out in nature, they're out alone together in the romantic scene, but then now where they're cold, they're in a colder environment where it's like a fancy place. It's not really them, or at least the people that they were.
There's a great shot when they get out of the car, when they're older, towards the end of their marriage, and it just looks like I'm looking at an old like an old curmudgeon going to the beach. There's no happiness in going to the beach, and going to the beach is supposed to be a happy occasion.
A vacation.
It just looked like an obligation to him. And it didn't look like they were having a good time. But that's it. But I believe that sequence is really important because isn't that the sequence? That is the sequence where she meets David, who is the brother of Maurice's wife, who she has an affair with.
Yeah.
She has an affair with, and it's different than the affair that Mark had. Mark has kind of a fleeting one night stand.
Yeah, his is more obviously sexual, and hers is actually about somebody emotional. Somebody that's actually giving her what she needs.
Yeah, she has some type of connection with him. We don't get the one thing about the movie, because it bounces back and forth so much, dealing with different time frames and timelines and plot lines and all that stuff, is some of those things aren't fleshed out too much.
Yeah.
So I don't think they have as big a significance or are as well played out or as delved into it enough to be as important as it's supposed to be, because this is supposed to be really, really important, and we don't get to see why she is attracted to David. Yeah. We don't get to see, what is he saying that her husband isn't saying.
You know what? A movie.
We just get kind of a montagey type moment.
A movie that makes me think of like something that would fill the gap of that for this movie is the movie Brief Encounter. Plays up that scenario very well, where you get the woman's point of view of like when you're in a relationship, you're married, and then you have this sudden attraction to a random person, and where them feelings come from, and how complicated it is, and that would have been interesting to insert that type of scenario. It would have probably added another 20 minutes to the movie. But
the movie is only an hour and 51 minutes long, so it's a relatively lean movie.
But
I guess they didn't want to play that out. I think it was more important that it happened. They wanted to keep
the fragmented feel to it. They didn't want to give. They didn't want to fill in. They wanted your imagination to fill in some of the gaps.
Yeah, I mean, and there's moments where, like, I believe she's in a plane with him or out to dinner or whatever, and you see that she's happy. Yeah. Definitely more happy than she is with Mark.
Yeah.
And there's a part where Mark finds out about them, and he comes up and he's like, "Oh, so this is where you've been." Carolyn says hi. Their daughter. And basically he says, he's like, "Oh, can I talk to my wife?" Basically.
Yeah, there's nothing more like cringeworthy than seeing a husband have to tell some other guy that, "Can I talk to my wife?" You're like, do I need to punch this guy out, or like, do I? Like...
I mean, yeah, and we have to say that there is a significant reason why she doesn't like her husband anymore. It's he is at fault greatly.
That's why he doesn't punch the guy out, because he knows he's complicit in why she's doing what she's doing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not only there's there's things on both sides of this marriage that are complicating it.
Yeah.
It's not just, one side's not to blame over the other. I think. But in this sequence, he basically asks her, "So, did you stay at the same hotel?" She says, "Yes." "Did you stay at the same room? Did you stay in the same room?" And she says, "Yes." And of course, he can deduce what that means.
Well, yeah,
of course.
and it once again highlights what it's like. It very much clearly shows what matters to each person in a relationship. He's very much first thing his mind goes to is, did you sleep with that guy? And of course, what did he do to cheat on her? Is to literally he just cares about going to have sex with some other woman.
What is very interesting is that it's never brought up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
At any point later on in the movie, like he never confesses to it.
Yeah.
She never finds out or anything like that. It's only us as audience members are aware of it.
Yeah.
And there are moments, and then in that moment though, we as audience members know that he's already cheated on her before. Yeah. So we're like, you at least to me, I'm like, you're a hypocrite, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What are you mad about? You already did what she just did. Yep. It's very, very interesting how that works. And basically she goes off and has a brief romance with this David character. But she ends up going back to Mark after a sequence where they're sitting there and they see an older couple. And she sees an older couple and she's reminiscing about those moments that we've seen in the film with them together. And then she blurts out, "Marriage." That's what makes, why
people
two people
act
sit
that
there.
way,
Why would people act that way? Sitting there not talking and whatnot. She says marriage, and she ends up going back to him, and they reunite.
Yeah,
they reunite into this third act party sequence where it's another like celebration at Maurice's place or whatever, and she goes there. And they go there, they're all dressed up, and there's still contention. They're still fighting. And she even says, like we should have just ended it there. Why did we get back together, basically? And they go to this party, and he's like, you're just going there, and at the church you're going to see David. And she's like, "Yes, I am." And it's like, oh, my goodness. This marriage is still on the rocks. And they go there, and she sees David, and then he goes off and takes a phone call. And he gets this job in Rome, but he sees them across the way and he gets extremely jealous. And he takes the phone call, but he also grabs this young woman to join him for some reason, to impress her or whatever. Almost to, I guess,
to show that he doesn't
Joanna
need
jealous.
her,
Yeah. And
it's funny. It's funny
he
how
talks to her like he knows her too. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is this guy on the phone. He's a big shot or whatever he says."
It's funny. It's funny that they obviously both want each other, but they keep getting they keep getting in their own way. In a way, especially him.
Yeah.
It's like he obviously is still in love with her, but instead of like being like, given into his, his own hypocritical nature and his guilt or whatever it is, he hides behind that and like continues to be an asshole.
Yeah, he is an asshole.
Yeah,
he's not. Yeah, and and then Maurice comes along. He's like, "Oh, when'd you get here?" He's like, "Oh, this is my fiance," the young girl he just randomly grabbed. So and then Maurice, of course, I guess is a dimwit. He's like, "Oh, so you finally divorced Joanna?" It's like, oh, I guess.
Oh,
right. I guess somebody saw something somewhere. I guess us as audience members aren't the only ones aware of this, this marriage on the rocks. And so David and Joanna come over, and then David says, "Oh yeah, this is my fiance," and it's the young woman that he was talking with. It's like, oh, what an interesting coincidence that happens to be that. And then they drive off together. And they are going to Rome, right? Because of this job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's kind of the end of the movie, isn't it?
It's kind of left open. Yeah, it's
very much left open to whether or not they're going to stay together for a long term or not, or
once again, a great comparison to before trilogy. It's like that at the end of the third movie. I mean, it's.
But there is a nice way that they end it.
Sure.
In the sense that it goes back to that passport sequence again. Kind of
there's always that thing that sparked it at the beginning. That spark's still there. And it's very So it's bookended with that passport sequence where he can't find his passport again, and this time they're crossing over from France into Italy. Yeah.
Because going to Rome, you gotta go to Italy to get to Rome.
Yes.
And he can't find it, so he opens up. He looks in the central console compartment. He opens up the trunk to look in the bags or whatever, and then of course she puts it on the driver's wheel. The driving wheel. What am I saying? Is that what it's called?
The wheel? The
steering
the wheel?
The steering wheel. Why did I say driving wheel?
The driving wheel.
It's too late for this. Yeah, it still works. Anyway, the steering wheel. And, he sees it, and that's how, the movie's bookended. But it's interesting that they're finally crossing over from France into Italy, and it kind of signifies, a new ground, a new path.
Maybe a new beginning,
a new beginning, if you will, because this whole movie's taking place in France. I don't think they ever got out of France.
Yeah.
Although in their car trip with that annoying family, they were supposed to go to Greece.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there was no way I'm staying in this car all the way from France to Greece. No, thank you. That is a long trip all the way to the Balkans.
We kind of skipped over that too. That finally, when they got towards the end of that trip, the dude, the Mr. Finney guy, tries to park a car under a thing.
My goodness!
And knocks off all the luggage off the top of the car.
Like a doofus.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of a doofus.
He is a doofus. Yeah.
And what is interesting is that there was a woman at the party, at that party, and she was like, my friend, whatever the woman's name was, I can't remember, but she was like, oh yeah, she told me about you, and I should really I should call you when I get here and all that stuff. And it turns out you're friends with Maurice and and like this woman who just like, I guess, protrudes in everybody's business at the party or whatever. And some interesting connection. But that is two for the road.
Yeah.
And there's so much to unpack with this movie that we've talked about mostly, but to kind of wrap it up and really put a bow on it, the movie's about relationships, it's about marriage, it's about the falling in love, the falling out of love, and those are universal themes that we still see in movies and real life today, which I think is what makes this movie very easy to watch.
Yeah, it hasn't really
to.
aged at all. Really, I mean,
it hasn't aged poorly.
No,
definitely hasn't. And it does help that this movie does star two fantastic actors in Albert Finney and Audrey Hepburn. I think Albert Finney is a very underrated actor. He was nominated 5 times for an Academy Award, whatever stock you put into, Academy Award nominations.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to have them to be considered, an all-time great, but he was at least recognized for his acting ability.
Yeah.
And Audrey Hepburn won a few awards herself. She's an icon. She's one of my favorites of all time. And this was an interesting film for her specifically because it was a more serious film than I think she had done in the past.
Yeah.
Because if you look at her filmography up to that point, there weren't that too many, dramatic or deeply
a lot more lighter
leveled roles. You do.
Yeah,
a lot more lighter roles. You have things like Roman Holiday, which was kind of her breakout role, Sabrina, Funny Face. You even have something like My Fair Lady. But you also have some darker things in there, but not quite as dark as this one.
Yeah, it's kind of, this is kind of like, reminds me of also, what's the Virginia Woolf, that type of story.
Yeah, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Which is,
that movie's darker, but yeah. But Elizabeth Taylor, I think, was on a completely different plane than anyone else.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, just thinking of Elizabeth Taylor, and I'm like, she could do anything. She was on another level, I think. She's one of my all-time favorites as well.
Yeah.
And what is interesting is both Audrey Hepburn and her were making movies at the same time, the 50s and 60s. That was when they really kind of rose to prominence.
It's kind of,
different actors, though. Different actors.
During that time that, we were getting a lot more of them films, as we were getting closer to the 70s, that were like turning the image of that time period on its head. Where you were getting away from just these like goody two-shoe these wholesome families, but now you're seeing behind the curtain, like the Nicholas Ray film, Bigger Than Life.
He was really poking at the 1950s.
The 1950s particularly, yeah. This one, of course, is in the 60s, but
the 60s, which of course is a tumultuous decade.
But wouldn't a lot of their earlier life be more in the 50s though? The earlier parts of would be technically in the beginnings of their relationship, might have been in the 50s.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, there was, but it's definitely an era in which movies were more introspective and commenting on society, and this movie definitely does to a certain extent. I mean, granted, not everybody, is having a trip through, the French countryside. Yeah. Not everybody can do that. It's not, the down and dirty, streets that we will see in 1970s cinema, which is literally dirty. Like it looks dirty. The settings are dirty, the people are dirty, the morals are dirty, all that kind of stuff. This movie's a little cleaner from that perspective, but it does deal with infidelity, which
definitely,
is a thing, a serious thing, and it's a movie that I wasn't actually aware of until about a year or two ago, but I'm glad I've seen it twice, and I'm really glad that we're spotlighting it now, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of it.
If I'm being honest, this was my first time, and I wasn't really aware of the movie until more recently. So
like I kind of just suggested it to Steven on a whim. Like we were just looking at, because Steven had this idea, I wanted to do an Albert Finney movie or something like that. Yeah. First we were looking at, anniversary type stuff, 50-year anniversaries. And then he was like, well, what about something with Albert Finney? And I was like, he was in Two for the Road with Audrey Hepburn. Why not? We could do that, kind of on a whim. And he was like, oh, sounds good to me.
Screw it. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's roll.
I mean, I prefer a lot of times to try to be able to talk about a movie I've at least seen already once,
Right.
This, because it's kind of tough to talk about something when you just seen it and you're still taking it in. But I wanted to challenge myself, I guess. And I think we accomplished. I think we did a pretty good job of covering the movie and being able to talk about some of the themes and some of the components of this movie that makes it interesting and worth watching. And I think it only has a DVD release, right? Or you said it was Twilight Time has the Blu-ray release. Yeah.
Yeah, Twilight Time's got it on Blu-ray. The DVDs, widely
hopefully
available.
It gets released somewhere else, like you said, Kino, because Kino's more affordable. That Twilight Time, man, they're like $50-$60 for releases.
Whoa, slow your roll there.
Their fucking releases are high.
They're typically $29.99 from their website, and I wait until they have a sale to where they drop down. But still, $30 for a Blu-ray I think is a lot, considering that most of their releases don't typically come with many special featers or anything interesting special features. Like this one here doesn't really have much of anything. Not a commentary or anything like that, but they're a smaller company. They can't afford to literally manufacture special features because that costs money.
Their movies are very much limited, so as they start to run out, they start to get more expensive.
That is true. They are limited to typically their releases are about 3,000 copies per release. Some are 5.
So that's why it feels like their stuff's always expensive, because they're always...
Because it sells out.
They sell out so fast, yeah.
They do sell out, and once they sell out, they're gone. The thing when it comes to niche labels is that sometimes their licenses run out after a while, and then somebody else picks them up.
Yeah.
That's happened with a few releases from Twilight Time.
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of Twilight Time crosses over with, like
Birdman of Alcatraz is a release that they put out a release of, but now I believe Olive came out with a release, or Kino. I get those two confused sometimes, I'm sorry.
And a lot of stuff is, like Eureka, Masters of Cinema has a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, in the UK, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a couple of other films, Inherit the Wind, as well as another... Judgment at Nuremberg was another one that was put out by Twilight Time and then got a release from someone else.
It's on Warner Archive.
No.
No. It's Kino. It's Kino.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I'm pretty sure you have those releases.
I have it, yeah.
Yeah, you have Judgment at Nuremberg.
It's on Kino.
Yeah, Judgment at Nuremberg is Kino, and I'm pretty sure the other one is as well. But to be honest, though the Kino releases are cheaper, and it's the same transfer.
Yeah,
pretty sure. Sometimes the special features may be different, but it's the same transfer, and the transfers are typically really, really good.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about these niche labels is they are getting decent masters from whomever they're getting the licensing from.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go on a huge rant here, but typically anything that was put out by Columbia Pictures way back in the day is owned by Sony now, and Sony really preserves their movies very, very well.
Yeah.
20th Century Fox, I think, is more of a crapshoot, but typically they're looking pretty good. You know, the other companies are a different story. Like Paramount is kind of a bit of a lost cause. Warner Brothers has Warner Archive now, so they're doing great work. But yeah, let's not go on a whole
it's
niche
a whole
physical media train.
Crazy, yeah. But
I
yeah,
don't know
Two
how
for
we
the
got on
Road,
that
man.
road.
I thought this was a really very interesting movie, and glad I discovered it. Kind of just that's part of this. That's like I said at the beginning when we started the show. Not only are we trying to maybe help inform you of a film that you might want to check out, but for me, this was a discovery myself. And this is a way I discover it with the audience. It's not just about us trying to inform you, but sometimes we're with you there finding a movie for the first time. So.
For sure. A lot of these overview videos I'm thinking video. A lot of these overview episodes we've done when it comes to the silent era or things like that, we've discovered stuff along the way.
Yeah. We're learning along with you guys. Yeah. I don't want to. We don't like to come off as experts. We're with you.
Yeah, and this is a film, starring two prominent actors. Audrey Hepburn. After you've seen all the ones that everybody knows about, and you're like, man, what's left for me to watch when it comes to Audrey Hepburn? Watch Two for the Road, basically.
Definitely.
So Steven, take us out.
Well, I'm gonna take us out of here. I think this is a good stopping point, and I don't know about what we got coming up, but you just guys hang with us here, and we'll have another episode out next week. But Andrew, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions.
And you can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings. You can also find me posting a lot of all the Blu-ray goodies, all the boutique stuff on our Cinema Discovery Project Instagram. Also, you can find the audio for this podcast on YouTube, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and that will be it for this episode. Thank you guys for watching, and hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.